Hey, hey, hey. Happy Friday, guys. Welcome back to Meet Me at Midnight. We are currently on episode 7. Um, I hope everybody has had a great week so far. I started my new job this week, so it's been a little draining with all the onboarding stuff, but it's been super fun. I have a lot of really fun coworkers. So it's been a good time. This week, I have a murdery but also kind of ghosty case for you guys. So we're going to be talking about Lizzie Borden and the Lizzie Borden house. It's if you haven't heard of it, it's a really famous but also controversial case. So let's get into it. So a little bit of background. Lizzie Andrew Borden was born on July 19th, 1860, in Fall River, Massachusetts. Her mother died 2 years after her birth in 1862, and then 3 years after that in 1865. Lizzie's wealthy father, Andrew Borden, remarried to Abby Gray, now known as Abby Borden, obviously. Despite Abby having been around Lizzie since a young age, she typically called her Mrs. Borden. You're gonna hear a lot of like random facts that maybe don't seem relevant right now, but they are more relevant the further along I get, so just bear with me, okay? But Lizzie's father was also known to be a very miserable, harsh man. But regardless, Lizzie had grown up to be a popular young woman, and she taught Sunday school and volunteered in charity work. Also worth mentioning, Lizzie had an older sister named Emma, and her and Lizzie often argued with their father and stepmother about money. For example, like they wanted to get like electricity in their house, I believe it was. But her father didn't want to pay for it, even though he was super rich. So obviously I said this was a murdery case, so we're going to talk about the events leading up to this. So on August 4th, 1892, Andrew Borden left home on business, and that left Lizzie, her stepmother, and a maid, Bridget Sullivan, or Maggie, as she was known as. Those were the people at the house that day. So sometime that morning, while Lizzie's father was gone, someone killed the stepmother in bed with a sharp instrument, hitting her 18 times. And when her father returned home, he took a nap on the couch in the parlor room and was killed in the same manner and was struck 11 times. And according to a testimony from Lizzie, she found him there at 11:15 in the morning. There are a few odd things that the police discovered during their investigation. One, Lizzie tried to buy prussic acid. From what I understand, that's cyanide. And she tried to buy that the day before the murders. So that is a poison. And then 2, on the day of the crime, Sullivan, or Maggie the maid, reportedly left the house carrying a mysterious package. 3, a few days after the murder, Lizzie reportedly burned a dress in a stove. And 4, an axe was discovered in the Borden house basement and was believed to be the murder weapon at the time. So, police had come to the conclusion that the murders must have been committed by somebody within the Borden house, and the maid, Maggie, was not charged or suspected, really, but Lizzie was arrested for those murders. These were her loose alibis, and I'm saying loose alibis for a reason, but we'll get to that. And these alibis only increased the suspicion surrounding her. So Lizzie knew so little of her mother's whereabouts, or her stepmother's whereabouts, apparently, after 9 a.m. when, according to Lizzie, she had, quote, gone upstairs to put shams on the pillows. So if she had been upstairs, she would have seen the stepmother who was murdered in the bedroom upstairs, which is suspicious. And then also during the 15 minutes in which Andrew Borden was murdered in the living room, Lizzie was out in the backyard barn, quote, looking for irons or lead sinkers for an upcoming fishing excursion. But when the barn was investigated, there were no footprints indicating anyone had been in there recently. So then on August 9th, a jury assembled for the Borden murders and was held in the courtroom over the police headquarters. And Lizzie Borden, Bridget Maggie Sullivan, Lizzie's uncle, John Morse, and others were questioned. And during the 4 hours of examination, Lizzie gave confused and contradictory answers. So 2 days after that, the trial adjourned, and Police Chief Hilliard, I don't know, arrested Lizzie Borden. And the next day, Lizzie entered a plea of not guilty to the charges of murder and was transported by rail car to the jail in Taunton, which was 8 miles north of Fall River. And then on August 22nd, so the first jury assembled on August 9th. So on August 22nd, Lizzie returned to the Fall River courtroom for her preliminary hearing, at the end of which Judge Josiah Blasdell pronounced her, quote, probably guilty. That's just so absurd. To be like, yeah, you're probably guilty. But he pronounced her probably guilty and ordered her to face a grand jury and possible charges for the murder of her parents. So that November, the grand jury met, and after first refusing to issue an indictment, the jury reconvened and heard new evidence from Alice Russell, who was a family friend who stayed with the two Borden sisters in the days following the murders. Russell had told grand jurors that she had witnessed Lizzie Borden burning a blue dress in the kitchen fire, allegedly because, as Lizzie explained her action, it was covered with, quote, old paint. Coupled with the earlier testimony from Bridget Sullivan that Lizzie was wearing a blue dress on the morning of the murders, the evidence was enough to convince grand jurors to indict Lizzie for the murders of her parents. So an old family friend basically sold her out, and obviously they weren't friends anymore. The trial of Lizzie Borden opened on June 5th the following year in 1893 in the New Bedford courthouse, before a panel of 3 judges and a jury of 12 men. These were all Caucasian men, which women weren't very respected, obviously, at the time, so she's already got everything stacked against her. While questioning Lizzie, one of the prosecutors threw Lizzie's blue frock on the prosecution table during his speech, and when opened, it revealed the skulls of Andrew and Abby Borden. And the sight of her parents' skulls, according to a newspaper account, caused Lizzie to fall into a faint that lasted for several minutes, which she's either a really good actor or she didn't do it. You know, it's one or the other. You don't have that kind of reaction for no reason. So all of the above that I just mentioned about the trial was essentially how everything went. It was a constant back and forth. The witnesses and Lizzie contradicted each other, and she contradicted herself with every statement, and not one person was on the same page as the other. The entire trial was so confusing. For the sake of making this not an entire documentary, like an hour and a half long episode, obviously I did like somewhere between the Cliff Notes version and the documentary version, right? Obviously I'm not going to read the entire trial transcript on here, but it was very back and forth. It was super confusing, but I will say the most compelling testimony came from Alice Russell, who had spoken again on the stand. And she was the one who said that she witnessed Lizzie burning the blue dress. But Russell described a visit from Lizzie the night before the murders in which she announced that she would be going on a vacation, and felt, quote, that something is hanging over me. I cannot tell what it is. I feel afraid something bad is going to happen. Which we'll kind of get into more of that later. There's some theories surrounding that statement specifically. But yeah, like I said, we'll get to that. After a long and confusing trial, the jury deliberated for an hour and a half before returning with the verdict of not guilty, and Lizzie was acquitted on June 20th, 1893. Lizzie spent the rest of her life outcasted from society until her death on June 1st, 1927. After everything happened with the murders and the trial and everything, she started going by Lisbeth instead of Lizzie. I'm not sure why, but she just switched up her name. She didn't want to be tied to that anymore, I don't think. But to this day, her trial is examined and her innocence remains in question. So, I mean, did she really brutally murder her father and stepmother? I mean, a lot of experts now say that she most likely did commit the murders. But at the time of the trial, I mean, even now, all of the evidence was too circumstantial for her to be convicted. Like, there's nothing concrete. There is a popular theory that John Morse, Lizzie's uncle, murdered everyone. Apparently, he didn't have a good relationship with Andrew, and there was a strange gap of time where his whereabouts were unknown. But he was never suspected. As far as I could tell, he wasn't one of the people that they immediately went to, because, I mean, like I said at the beginning, the police thought it was somebody who was in the house. This case is also often referred to as America's Jack the Ripper case, which is a coincidence since I talked about that last week. It's been immortalized and probably be talked about forever. Half the world thinks Lizzie did it. Half the world thinks she didn't. So it's kind of up to you to decide. But I wanted to point out a fun, like, creepy fact about this case as well. There was a song, I want to say almost like a nursery rhyme, that, like, came of this whole thing. But it's it's a jump rope song, I guess. But I'm going to read it to you. I'm not going to sing it because I don't sing, so sorry about it. But here is what it says. It says, Lizzie Borden took an axe and gave her mother 40 whacks. When she saw what she had done, she gave her father 41. Which is creepy enough as it is. It kind of reminds me of the Freddy Krueger one, like, 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, get your crucifix. 7, 8, it's too late. 9, 10, better sleep. 9, 10, never sleep again. I said I wasn't gonna sing and I did, so I'm really sorry for everybody who listened to that. Yeah, that's just like a creepy thing. I feel like that'd be like in a horror movie or something. But now that we've talked about the case and a little bit of the history, like I've said in every paranormal episode, where there's death, ghosts follow, right? A+ for everybody who knew that. So we're gonna move on to the paranormal side of things. So the people who bought the Lizzie Borden house were told that it wasn't haunted. From what I understand, the owners have changed a couple times, obviously. But moral of the story being, they were told it wasn't haunted. As they and their staff prepared to open it to the public, they started getting a lot of activity. So some of the base things they would hear were loud footsteps, the disembodied voice of a woman, laughter at strange times, doors opening and closing, a woman crying, shadow figures, full body apparitions, orbs of light, objects moving around, knocking, and more, like, typical ghost activity, okay? The owners also brought in a medium named Chip to get a reading of the house pretty early on. And just to put the cherry on top, they blindfolded him and led him throughout the house just so he could, like, report what he was feeling without seeing where he was. And he reported that, quote, all of a sudden I'm very agitated and upset. There's a sense of being out of control. I'm being hit by every kind of emotion. I'm trying to get a grip on my emotions and I just can't. I hear, stop, leave me alone. He was picking up on the spirit of a woman in the house as well, who was getting increasingly angry and saying, quote, you all think you know everything. You know nothing about me. Which I would think that would be Lizzie. I feel like that would make sense to be Lizzie because everyone thinks she's guilty. And then he hears that same voice screaming, quote, don't help me. You got him blindfolded. You think you're smart. I don't care what you think. I have to look right. I won't crack. I'm sorry. Which, there are some theories where that could also be Maggie. That specific time could be Maggie as well. I don't know. It just depends what you believe because a lot of this is, like, based off a medium and obviously the paranormal. So if you're more of a fact girly, I mean, not that the actual murder case had a lot of facts, you can look more into that. I'm more inclined to believe the paranormal side of things, just because of the way the justice system had worked previously and the way the police force apparently didn't collect or find evidence, but also just the tools they had to determine guilt of people who were, oh my god, what word am I looking for? Of people who were accused. That's the word. So some more specifics at the Lizzie Borden house overall. There are some particular and like spirits throughout the house to talk about. So obviously Abby Borden, who was Lizzie's stepmother, she's often seen wandering around the house. Some guests, so it's now a hotel. I don't know if I said that already, but it's now a hotel, or like a bed and breakfast that people can stay at. But people think it's a maid or the host of the B&B. Some people will get up and try to greet her, and then they find themselves alone, like she just disappears. She's mostly seen on the second floor hallway and in the guest room, which, I mean, tracks. She was murdered on the first floor, supposedly. And then the Lizzie Borden house, like I said, is a bed and breakfast, and you can stay in the room where Abby was murdered. And in that room, people who stay feel their bed sheets tighten around them and hear brushing along the sheets and feel hands slide over the covers, which I'd be out of there so fast. I like scary stuff, but I ain't down for that. When I'm sleeping, that's my time. And then obviously another one of the spirits that's often seen is Lizzie Borden. Guests staying in the room next to Lizzie's will wake up in the middle of the night to hear a girl crying through the wall. And there are so many EVPs recorded of people talking to Lizzie and getting responses back. And then Andrew Borden is also seen walking around the downstairs area in the parlor where he was murdered. And he's also been spotted in the dining room. So particularly in this house, they hear a lot of noises, but they see a lot of shadow figures, a lot of apparitions. Even if you go on their website, like, they have pictures on there, like, because they'll do a ghost tour of the house. So if you go to the Lizzie Borden house website, they have pictures of, like, photos that people have taken where, like, faces appear in the pictures after the fact and things like that. And then I also wanted to mention, which I completely forgot to mention earlier, was the day before the death of Andrew and Abby Borden. This is the most tragic part. A cat was also brutally murdered on the property and found dead. So allegedly, guests will feel something rub up against their leg, and can hear meows throughout the house, which is so sad. But I'd be chill with a ghost cat. That I can do. Um, a lot of people who stay the night in the house also have visions and or nightmares while they sleep, which, according to the owners, is incredibly common for the overnight guests if they make it through the night. And ghost hunters and paranormal investigators have quite a few interesting theories about all of this as well. I talked about earlier when I said we'd get back to it that Lizzie had told Russell that she felt like something was hanging over her and she couldn't tell what it is, and she feels like something bad's gonna happen. One of the many theories is that Lizzie was possessed by a demon to commit the murders and doesn't even remember doing it. And we'll get into a couple other theories as well. But as part of my research, I watched a couple different channels, like paranormal investigation channels, since they had taken tours with the owners. First being Sam and Colby. I've talked about them before. They're incredible. If you haven't watched them and you like watching scary stuff, go watch their channel. I am not sponsored. I just really like their stuff. They're fun to watch. But they went to the Lizzie Borden house in 2021 to stay overnight, and they brought a medium with them named Amanda, and she was asked to not be given any information about the Borden house, or about Lizzie Borden, or about anything about where they were going. She didn't want to know anything. She just wanted to go and see what happened. So it's kind of similar to like the original owners who brought that medium chip in, and he was blindfolded so he couldn't see where he was. This was kind of the same thing, except she could see, she just didn't know anything about the house. So it was another kind of blind experiment with a medium. Her first impression was the morning of the video when they were at their hotel and she saw a woman in the bathroom with her. And this woman turned out to be Abby, who told the medium that she, quote, ran, which is in line with the fact that if an axe or any kind of weapon to create the trauma that was on the bodies were used, there were no, like, blood splatters. Like, if it was an axe, for example, like, you smash a head in with an axe and you yank that out, the wall behind you is going to be covered in blood splatter, and there's going to be bone and, like brain matter, like, on that wall as well. So there's basically, with Abby telling the medium that she ran, it's in fact because there was nothing, no blood splatters or anything like that around where Abby and Andrew were killed. Just the bodies were there. So I don't know, maybe she wasn't killed in the bedroom, but somewhere else. Who knows? And then when Amanda, the medium, got to the actual house, her first impression was she saw Maggie, who was a maid at the house, and apparently Maggie said, quote, the money wasn't worth it. And this is another popular theory. A lot of people think that Maggie was paid off to lie on the stand during Lizzie's trial. And most people think this. She was, I believe, an Irish immigrant. And she was a maid. She didn't have a ton of money. All of a sudden, after Lizzie's trial and everything, she left, moved out of the state, and bought a bunch of horses, and like had like a horse ranch. Like, where did she get all that money from? Nobody knows. So a pretty popular theory is that she got paid off to lie, but who paid her off? No one knows. Anyways, another thing that Amanda said, the medium, was that she believes John Morse is the killer, who is Lizzie's uncle, without a doubt. She also got the feeling that a butcher knife was used as the weapon. And this theory also kind of tracks, just because the police never actually found the murder weapon. They just assumed it was the axe because that was the only thing that could have done that was currently in the house. But there was no evidence on that axe that it was used as the murder weapon. They just assumed it was. And then another interesting video to watch is, which I won't go much into it. It's all just more like experiences, which I've talked about, like some of the basic things that people experience here. But like I said, you guys can go watch it if you want. But this video is one of the other research videos I did, is from a creator named Seth. Seth Borden, which, if you're going to beat me to the punchline here, he is the 5th cousin of Lizzie Borden. So he is actually in the Borden family, and he went and did a paranormal investigation at the house as well. Both this video and the Sam and Colby video would be super cool to watch if you like seeing that kind of stuff, especially coming from the perspective of like an ancestor. It's really fascinating. But yeah, so that is the Lizzie Borden house. 10 out of 10 would recommend just going to take a tour, just to see everything, even stay in the Airbnb or stay in the B&B if you want. Obviously another dream destination. I can't say dream destination, but I think it would be really fun. If I found myself on the East Coast, it would be somewhere I would definitely like to see. Honestly, I couldn't tell you guys who I thought committed the crime. There was just no concrete evidence and a lot of sus people. Like, as I was reading, I kept like flip-flopping because I went into it without assuming anything. I just wanted to see what I thought at the end. And I honestly couldn't tell you. Like, I see the evidence, or rather lack of evidence, and I want to say it's not Lizzie, but then I read things about the trial that makes me kind of think it is Lizzie. And then I also take the paranormal stuff into account, and with a medium being there, and I can kind of see why it wouldn't be Lizzie again, but then how much of that can I really take into account for her guilt, you know? So I have no idea. You let me know what you guys think. And then, oh, I forgot to mention, this obviously is a crazy house. It's super haunted, but most of the people who book to stay there overnight usually don't even make it through the night. Like, there's the 2 specific rooms, I think. I don't remember which 2, but there are 2 specific rooms that when people book to stay overnight in those, they usually pack up in the middle of the night and leave because they can't make it. So it's definitely a bucket list item. So as always, thank you guys so much for listening. I feel like I'm kind of like dragging today, probably talking slow, so I'm sorry about that. I would love to get some thoughts on the podcast so far, constructive criticism, whatever you guys got for me. Maybe some topic recommendations, just to like switch it up. So if you guys want to DM me on Instagram or something at MMAM_the podcast, if you've got the chance, I would appreciate it. Otherwise, I will meet you guys at midnight next week. Bye.